Luke chapter 1, we're still here over in the book of Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1, and I'm just going to read verse 18, reading out of the King James Version, and you will find these words. And Zacharias said unto the angel, Whereby shall I know this? For I am an old man, and my wife well stricken in years. We do thank and praise the name of our God for the reading of his word. If I was to focus in on a thought or a topic on tonight, as we know our overall theme of this quarter, this year is producing a productive Christian. If I was to focus in on a topic, it would have to be the wrong perspective. The wrong perspective. Last week we dealt with the first 4 verses of Luke. We learned about Theophilus, who we, through our studies, learned could have been a soldier at the Apostle Paul's trial. He could have been a Gentile. A Gentile is someone who is not of the Jewish faith. Or it could be the general Christian public. We don't know who Theophilus is. But through our studies last week, we also discovered that the author of Luke intended this gospel to be written directly to Theophilus. Now, whether Theophilus is that Roman soldier or that Gentile looking to convert over to Christianity, or just a general Christian public, Luke had a mission, plot, purpose, and plan to write letters directly to Theophilus. We also learned last week, if you was not aware, that the author of Luke was also the author of Acts, that the book of Acts is just a continuation of the narrative penned by the author of Luke. And we also discovered last week, we asked a critical question that we wanted to learn more about this Jesus, and we did not know where to start. Well, we came up with three answers to that particular question. Where do we start? First and foremost, that we had to understand that there are multiple perceptions of the Gospels, that there's plenty of people out here who is teaching and preaching doctrines coming from the same book, yet has different outtakes. There's different interpretations of the Gospel. We also dealt with the fact how Luke himself was a physician. His occupation was that of a doctor, and in order to be a doctor, you had to go to school to study. You had to research. You had to be knowledgeable in your area of field in order to become a doctor. And we found out that God will plant you under ministries or under a ministry with whom you can trust. Remember again who the book of Luke was written to. It was written to Theophilus. And the author of Luke literally states here in verse number 3, it seemed good to me also, having a perfect understanding, meaning he has taken out some time to research, to survey the land, to interview the apostles themselves. He had a good understanding of the scriptures, and so built trust with Theophilus. So we dealt with how God will plant you under leadership with whom you can trust, to finally that God will be able to reassure our faith. That through our studies of the letters that Luke has written to Theophilus, both in the Gospel of Luke and in the book of Acts, by taking the time out to sit down and actually study these, we are able then to reassure our faith in God. That verse 4 of Luke chapter 1 will be true, that thou mightest know the certainty of those things wherein there has been instructed, that our faith will be reassured. We dealt with that on last week, and if you would like to hear that full sermon, it is here on Facebook, and it is also posted on our YouTube channel, which, let me pause and suggest that you go ahead and go subscribe, for we're looking to be doing some extraordinary things throughout this year, strictly on our YouTube channel, and we'll post it here on Facebook. But here, in these next couple of verses, we're introduced, or the narrative of Jesus begins, and it actually begins not with Jesus himself, but rather with Zacharias. Can I tell you who Zacharias is? Zacharias is a priest. He is a religious leader in the temple. He's a priest. He is also a husband, the husband of Elizabeth. Pause there, bookmark it, study it. We're going to come back there a little later. He is the husband of Elizabeth. Not only is he the husband of Elizabeth, but the Bible suggests to us that Zacharias has the perfect resume. That happens down in verse number 6. Can I read it to you? It says, and they were both righteous, talking about Zacharias and his wife, before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blamelessly. He had a perfect resume. But there was an issue with Zacharias. He didn't have any children. The reason why he did not have any children was because his wife, Elizabeth, was barren. Not only that, but they were in their old age. They was elderly. So we find out that Zacharias is a priest. We find out that he's a husband. We find out that his resume is perfect. He has the perfect resume. We find out that he's childless. And we find out that he is in his old age. If you continue on reading, you will find out here in verse number 8 that Zacharias is now at work. He is in the temple, and his job is to ensure that the incense that was in the temple remains burning. Okay. Not only that, but there's also a whole multitude of people, group of people. That's going to come in very heavy as we continue to study the book of Luke. But there's a whole multitude of people here at the temple, waiting to hear from Zacharias. This group of people is standing outside of the temple, praying, and Zacharias is by himself in the temple. Or at least that's what Zacharias believes. For down in verse 11, you find out that he is visited by an angel. And this angel tells Zacharias that his wife is going to have a baby, that his wife is going to get pregnant. and that this baby's name is going to be John. The angel doesn't stop there, for the angel then instructs Zacharias how he should handle this child, and the importance of why this child is being born, or the child's mission, plot, purpose, and plan. You get down to verse 18, the verse that I've read unto you, and Zacharias literally says, who are you? And how is this supposed to happen? I like this. I love this. Because in verse 18, he literally says, whereby shall I know this? And I am a man in my old age, and so is my wife, stricken in years. Who are you? And how is this supposed to happen? This thing seemed impossible. Now, the angel, in his anger, responds to Zacharias and introduces himself. Okay, pause, stop, rewind, and press play. I just find it funny how when the angel appears to Zacharias, Zacharias is afraid. The angel does not take time to introduce himself then. He waits until this present time, after he has already given the prophecy, and after he has already given the instructions, and after Zacharias has showed his heart. Now the angel wants to introduce himself. The angel says, I am Gabriel. I am sent by God to give you this good news. Not only am I sent by God to give you this good news, but because you don't believe in this good news, you're now going to become silent. You're not going to be able to speak. So, the angel literally tells Zacharias, because of your unbelief, you're not going to be able to speak. Zacharias leaves the temple, and the people that is outside praying, that was out there waiting to hear from the priest, from the religious leader, literally perceives, because Zacharias cannot speak to them, that he has had a vision from God. Got a couple of questions about this, because it is important that we understand why Luke placed this here in a narrative. Need I not remind you that Luke is writing to Theophilus so that Theophilus might learn about the birth, the life, the ministry, and the resurrection, death and resurrection of Jesus. And so now we have to understand why the author of Luke includes in the Gospel of Luke a time period before Jesus is even born. This literally, if you're reading it, has absolutely nothing to do with Jesus this week. Next week, we're going to understand a little bit more as to why we started here as we continue our studies through Luke. But as of right now, just reading this firsthand, this has nothing to do with Jesus. So I got some questions. Sorry, let me send this off. So I got some questions. My first question, and this is quite interesting to me. As I was studying this, you remember when I told you the occupation of Zacharias? Zacharias is a priest. Zacharias is a religious leader. Don't let this go over your head. Zacharias is a pastor, a minister, evangelist, deacon, saint, or friend. He is a religious leader, and he is visited by an angel of God. Not only that, the angel brings news to a prayer that Zacharias has been answering. Can you put it over there, please? Because it's going to camera, it's going to pick it up. So Zacharias is a religious leader in the temple, and I do pray that y'all can't hear that. I'm pretty sure y'all can. I pray that it's not as loud as it was last week. But Zacharias is a religious leader in the temple, and an angel appears before Zacharias, giving Zacharias the answer to his prayer. And instead of being glad and joyful, Zacharias literally questions the angel. Okay, pause. Stop, rewind, and press play, because I need you to understand the significance of this. Zacharias is a religious leader. He is someone who is leading the people, teaching them based off of the laws of Moses. He would have studied up on how God makes ways out of no ways, how he shows up and shows out every single time the children of Israel needed something from God. Zacharias would have studied that, and in turn is teaching that to the congregation. But when the angel of the Lord appears to Zacharias and literally gives Zacharias the answer to his prayer, Zacharias' response is, "Who are you, and how is this going to happen?" Okay, in other words, why doesn't Zacharias, the priest, the religious leader, believe the angel Gabriel? Why was Zacharias' response, "Who are you, and how is this going to happen?" Literally because Zacharias is questioning the authority of this prophecy and is questioning his circumstance based on his perspective. Okay, pause, stop, rewind, and press play. I don't want you to miss this. Zacharias is literally questioning the authority of the prophecy, and he is questioning his circumstance based on his perspective. Okay, let me try to make this relevant to you, that some prayers that has been being prayed, God answers the prayer. He gives you some type of sign, some type of signal, some type of flag, some type of advertisement that tells you that he is about to answer this prayer that you have been praying. And instead of being gladful and joyful, questions the authority or the authenticity of the prophecy. Not only questioning that, but also questioning the circumstance based on your perspective. Because in your eyes, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. In your eyes, it seems impossible. In your eyes, you've been hearing the same stuff over and over and over again, and you have been failed too many times, and now based on your current circumstance and your perspectives, begins to question the authority of this prophecy. Zacharias literally is not believing The angel sent straight from God because he's questioning the authority by which this angel was coming and the circumstance based on his perspective. So Zacharias doesn't believe the angel, even though he's a priest, because of his circumstance, and because he doesn't understand the authority. Because you got to keep in mind, Jesus hasn't came yet. What we know is vastly different from what they know. They don't know who Jesus is yet. They don't know the sacrifice that Jesus is going to make. And they don't know the authority by which Jesus is coming. See, they are under a different mindset. And it's scary to imagine that there are some folk in 2024 that has been taught about God, that has been taught about the scriptures, has been taught about the authority by which God has and operates, and still will not believe because of their current circumstance, because you're allowing what you're seeing to influence your faith. And may I suggest to you what the author of Luke is trying to suggest to us? And that is, you cannot allow your perception to persuade your faith. Woo. So why doesn't Zacharias believe the angel? Because he's allowing his perception to influence his faith. My next question then is simple. Okay, after Gabriel introduces himself to Zacharias and tells Zacharias the authority by which he is sent straight from God to give him this good news, why then does the angel Gabriel silence Zacharias? See, the angel Gabriel literally tells Zacharias, you're not going to be able to speak until this thing is done. Okay? We got 9 months to go before this thing is done. Zacharias is still at work. He's still at the temple, and there's still a group of people that is expecting to hear a word from Zacharias. And the angel of the Lord has just silenced Zacharias. And I want to know why. Can I submit to you that the reason why the angel Gabriel silences Zacharias is because of his title and the fact that he has a heavy influence on people? Don't miss it. Zacharias is a priest. Zacharias is a religious leader with a perfect resume. And I am sure that there is folk that know about it. And because of his title of priest, because he is a religious leader, he is in a position to influence others. And because he is able to influence others, if he goes outside that temple talking nonsense, talking as if he does not believe in the God with which he preaches about, it is going to negatively influence the congregation. And then if he turns around and go home and tells his wife what the prophet or what the angel has said, and if his wife has just a little bit of negativity in her negativity matched with his unbelief is going to cause a disruption in the plan of God. The angel of the Lord literally has to silence Gabriel, not only so that God can prove himself to Zacharias, but so that Zacharias does not mess up the plot, purpose, and plan of God that he is using through Elizabeth, his wife. The prophecy is clear that Elizabeth is going to become pregnant. Elizabeth is going to bear a child. Even though they're in their own old age, Elizabeth is to bear a child. But because of Zacharias' unbelief caused by his perception of his circumstances, and because he did not believe or questions the authority by which this prophecy comes from, Gabriel, the angel, literally has to now silence Zacharias. So why doesn't Zacharias believe the prophecy? Because Zacharias is questioning the authority, and because Zacharias is questioning the circumstance based on his perspective. Why then does Gabriel silence Zacharias? Because he has too much influence due to his title of priest and his title of husband. That Zacharias could literally influence the congregation and in turn influence his wife. So then what happens at the end? I like this part. See, whenever I was learning about putting together sermons, I remember somebody telling me that you could never leave on a negative note. I can't leave you on a negative note. I got to bring you to the end. So what happens here at the end? Zacharias is silenced. He can't influence anybody either which way. And God's word is fulfilled. Watch the text. I love this, don't you? Gabriel only appears, according to Luke, only appears to Zacharias. He does not give a visit to Elizabeth. So Zacharias, in his silence, can only think about the prophecy that the angel has given him, and he cannot speak it to his wife. And the Bible does not declare, nor does it suggest to us, that he tried to communicate the prophecy to his wife. In turn, instead, the Bible tells us that Elizabeth becomes pregnant. The prophecy is fulfilled. And I would submit to you that there are some times, there are some moments in this Christian walk where you're going to pray and pray and pray and pray, and then turn around and pray some more. And it's going to seem like God ain't hearing you. It's going to seem like he ain't answering you. Whenever he does speak, whenever he does answer, we have to be careful not to allow our circumstance to determine or to influence our faith. We have to be careful not only not to allow our perspective on our circumstance to influence us, but we have to be careful not to negatively influence others. And in the end, God's will is going to be fulfilled. Thank you, Jesus.